Welcome to the Public Voice Salon. We are an open dialogue on education, the arts, and social change. And we are here today in Brooklyn, New York, in a beautiful green backyard of Robert Thomason. I got to know Robert, or Bob as we call him, at Judson Memorial Church back in the late 90s when I began attending there. And this is a man who means a lot to me as a friend, as a person. He is a very spiritual man. He's a man of art and culture and literature, and also he's the kind of person who's been breaking down barriers, racial barriers, for a long time now. He bought his house here in Flatbush, Brooklyn, way back, and was one of the first white families here on the block. And he's the kind of person I think who should be seen more on television, because he's not famous per se, but in a better world you would see more and hear more of people like Bob Thomason, because he has a way, I know for me and for many others, to bring our spirits up just by his mere presence. He makes wonderful announcements in the church if he's reading a novel and he wants to share it, or if he sees an art exhibit he wants to share it, or if he takes one of his many travels around the world. Ever since retiring from his job as a librarian at the age of 57, he's taken bicycle trips all around the world, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that. And his enthusiasm for life is just so contagious. To be around Bob, you just feel the joy of living, and every moment is precious. And you are a dear soul, Bob, and I want to welcome you to the Public Voice Salon.
Well, welcome to Brooklyn, John and Claudia. We're standing in my backyard in Brooklyn, and just notice how much green there is here. Every house has green in the back and in the front. And this house that we're standing in back of, my wife and I, we live on the second floor, and we rent out the first and the third floor. And when we were living in this house as tenants, for about from 1964 to 1973. The owner, a German man, Mr. Holzhauser, lived on the third floor, and in 1973 he decided to sell the house. He only had to come down one flight of stairs and offer us the house. It was beyond imagination that a white family would buy this house. He went to a real estate broker blocks away on Church Avenue, who began bringing prospects through. That's when we found out the house was for sale. So we wanted to buy it, and this prospect wanted to buy it. This three-family brick house in good shape was going for $34,500, a price I could afford as a reference librarian in a public library, among the lowest paid professionals. This other guy said the price was all right, but he wanted storm windows, he wanted various improvements, and we knew Mr. Holzhauser, being very German, felt his house was perfect. Okay. So we said, we'll take the house exactly as it is, and we'll give you $2,000 more. So we went to contract for $36,500. Now, I was in the Army for 45, 46, 47. I'm 87 years old now. Oh, wow. Because I was in the Army, the U.S. government was guaranteeing our mortgage. 16 banks refused me a mortgage on this house.
Why did they refuse? Why?
Because I was buying in a black neighborhood.
Oh my God.
There is institutional racism in America, and there's personal racism. Yes. And finally, the 17th bank said yes. Oh. I rushed down there, I signed whatever, and we've long since paid off that mortgage. But if a whole neighborhood cannot get mortgage money, it cannot be what I was dreaming of, a multiracial, multi-income neighborhood, because the diversity makes for more creativity, a better place to raise children. Yes. And so you had to be able to get mortgage money here. Well, Ralph Nader came to our help. He recruited these college students who lived in the United Church of Christ parsonage. That's about 5 blocks from here.
Okay.
And those students were living in the church parsonage. And the students were being paid $5 a week plus room and board, and they were like a staff for neighbors like myself. They came up with this idea of 3x5 green cards. Green cards. Green is over against the bank's redlining.
Yeah.
And we went up and down our blocks. We got our neighbor's name, address, the name of their bank, if they wanted, the amount they had on deposit. And then we asked them to sign a statement at the bottom. I will withdraw my savings from my bank if the Green Lighting Committee asks me to. Then we shuffled the cards out by the bank, and we took a stack in to the bank president.
Yes.
For the smaller banks, $300 or $400 million banks. When the president saw the stack of withdrawals, he changed the policy.
Yeah.
He advertised the change, and he made quarterly reports to us on where he was putting his mortgage money.
Yes.
But we organized a $1 million withdrawal from the Dime Savings Bank,
Right.
a $6 billion bank, and the president of the Dime said, "So take $1 million out, what do I care?" It was like you were swatting a fly. So we had to have some different strategy for the bigger banks.
You're a man, Bob, who was anti-racist at your core, okay? And here we are in Brooklyn, okay? Now, wait, I just want to say, here we are in Brooklyn, and we have racial situations happening across the country. You know, in Ferguson, we had a situation in Staten Island with Mr. Garner, who was a chokehold, you know. And how have you been able to bring together white and black, and what is your vision of this? Well, Martin Luther King called it a beloved community. I think that's what you have, that kind of vision. And how do you bring people together?
Well, first, I believe in a God of love best revealed in Jesus. That's number one. I also believe I am a sinner. And I got a vision of that. I had a neighbor, a black neighbor living across the street, Emma Collier.
Yes.
And Emma was preparing supper. And she had some potatoes to peel. And she pulled out a carving. She opened up a drawer and pulled out a carving knife. And she began peeling those potatoes. When I saw this black woman with a knife in her hand, I realized I was afraid of her. I realized I was a racist. And I told my black neighbors, I am a racist. And my black neighbors accepted me as a racist. That's a profoundly humbling experience.
Yes.
But that happened here in Prospect Leverett Gardens. I think that's very important. Now, let's see.
Well, you were one of the first white families in the neighborhood. Is that true?
We were the first white family to buy a house on this block.
In Flatbush, Brooklyn.
Yeah, in Prospect Leverett Gardens, on the east side of Prospect Park, south of the Brooklyn Botanic Garden.
Yeah.
It's a neighborhood of about 50,000 people. And let's see now. When our neighborhood, with neighborhoods across America, got 2 laws through the Congress, signed by the president, still on the books through Reagan, Bush, and Nixon. The first law says a bank has to publicly reveal by census tract where it's putting its mortgage money. And then we had legal proof of what we already knew. They weren't putting it in our census tracts. And the second law says if a bank wants to merge with another bank or open up a branch, it has to satisfy the FDIC that it is serving the credit needs of its present branches. The first bank in the nation to apply for a branch under that new law was the Greater New York Bank for Savings, a $4 billion bank. Using the first law, they wanted to put a branch in Manhattan. Using the first law, we gathered evidence that they weren't serving their branches in Brooklyn. We took that evidence before an FDIC hearing here in the city. The head of the FDIC said to the president of the bank, no branch in Manhattan. the president of the bank turned to us and said, "What can I do for you?" That was a thrilling moment in my life. I realized we had power for justice.
Oh, wow, wow. Well, Bob, well, you inspire me because you have such a joy for life. Okay, so here you are, an activist taking on power, and yet, when you get up in the morning, you have such a spirit about you in terms of you love to connect with people, you love to tell stories, you like to travel around the world. Would you say this came from your spiritual background? Talk a little bit about your spirituality.
I come from very conservative parents. I have gone through a tremendous personal change.
Oh, wow.
My parents were Republicans. They voted for Hoover, Landon, Dewey, Wilkie. They thought Roosevelt was the devil. So that's the way I was thinking when I was growing up in Forest Hills here in New York.
Okay.
Okay.
Hold it a little closer to the microphone. Just good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see, where am I?
Conservative upbringing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But my mother took me to the Church of the Gardens in Forest Hills.
Oh.
So when I went to the University of North Carolina, there was a high school teacher who got me into the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. So I went to the local Baptist church there. And the Sunday school teacher there, Dr. Epps, was a professor of Greek at the university. He could read the New Testament in the original language.
Wow.
And Dr. Epps, I have a picture of Dr. Epps down inside by my desk.
Okay.
Downstairs.
In the home office downstairs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Dr. Epps said to me, "You know, the Bible is very much on the side of the widows, the orphans, the powerless people, and the Democratic Party is more on that side than the Republicans are." So I changed politics because of religion, and I began going to churches that were into social justice. And that's why I'm going to Judson Church.
When did you start going to Judson Church?
I started in 1955.
Okay.
Judson is a church that wants social justice, and that's what I'm into here.
Yeah, I want to just take the mic for 1 second, Bob, because I found my voice at Judson Church. I want you to know that. I want people watching at home to know that when I started going to Judson, I was very kind of surprised and felt liberated that there was an open mic part of the church. Most churches, when you go there, you just sit and you're passive and you listen and you take the word of God as holy and you don't say anything, you don't talk back, okay? Judson is the opposite. During the sermon, okay, there's a portion where anybody can get up and make an announcement about something that's happening in the community. And there's another portion where you could share a celebration or a concern. It took me a year to get up the nerve because the people at this church are so smart and so political. And I was like, my God, I'm just a hick from New Jersey. What do I know? I'm going to go to these smart church radicals in the village. But Bob, I think it was because of you, because you have such a spirit of humanity, and you would get up there and you would just share basic things about your life, about a book you were reading, or an art gallery that you went to, or some issue of social justice, and there was such an exuberance and enthusiasm, and you were so grounded and so human that inspired me, and I doubt if I would have this TV show if it wasn't for you, so I want to thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah.
You're welcome.
So thank you for that. How did you develop such a strong, confident manner of speaking in public? Were you always like this, or were you ever shy?
I'm a very shy person, and when I was 13 years old, we moved from Forest Hills to a 25-acre farm outside of Flemington, New Jersey. And you had to live 3 miles out from the high school in order to ride the school bus. And we lived 2 2/3 miles out.
Okay.
So I began riding my bicycle into high school.
Okay.
Right? And in the high school, they had noon-hour dancing. I was dying to dance, but I was too bashful to ask any woman to dance. So I played the record player.
Okay.
And that's how I learned these songs. I like New York in June. How about you? I like a Firefly tune. How about you? Ba 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 da dum, ba ba da ba da dum, ba ba da da ba ba da da da. How about you? Well, I learned all those songs from the 40s, playing the records, you know. But I wasn't able to ask anybody to dance.
Yeah, you love music. I remember one time you were telling me about one of your trips, because Bob has taken bicycle trips every year since his retirement at the age of 57. He picks a different place in the world, and he takes a bicycle trip there. He's been all over the world on his bicycle, okay? And one time you were telling me a story about the song Moon River from one of your trips. Do you remember that one? Okay.
Moon River, wider than a mile, I'm crossing you in style someday. Old dream maker, you heartbreaker, wherever you're going, I'm going your way. Two drifters off to see the world, there's such a lot of world to see. We're after the same rainbow's end, waiting round the bend, my huckleberry friend, Moon River and me. Now, my love for music comes from my father.
Okay.
My my father's mother. You see my eyes?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
My eyes.
Yes.
My father's mother was an American Indian.
Right? Okay.
You see that in my eyes?
Look at the eyes now. The indigenous.
I got it.
Okay. Got it? Okay.
Okay. And my father was raised.
Hold it closer.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Okay.
My father was raised in New Orleans.
Oh.
And his mother was, she played piano, popular pieces on the stage, and she had contracts all over the country. Her name was Fannie Mae Bumpus, an American Indian. And my father's family were very conservative. They were printers. And a woman on the stage was like unacceptable.
Okay.
and my grandparents lived in the same house, and for 7 years never spoke to each other. You can imagine the tension in that house.
This was your grandparents then?
Yeah, this is my grandparents.
On your father's side.
On my father's
did not
side.
speak to each other at all. Okay.
For 7 years.
Whoa.
So because of that experience, my father decided never to marry.
Oh.
All right.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
then his family came to New York when he was 14 years old, and they were very poor. He said he would have been happy to pick a banana skin off the sidewalk and eat it.
Oh, yes.
Well, then
yes.
my mother was raised in Stafford, Connecticut.
Oh, yeah.
Her father, she was an intellectual. She was into books.
Hold it close.
I never saw my father read a book, but he was into music.
Oh.
And my mother, that's why there are so many books here, but that's also why there's such a love of music here. Music just, I think, is a language from God.
Yes, yes.
Right. So my mother came from Stafford, Connecticut to New York, and she and my father would be, they worked together in the same accounting office in Manhattan, and they would be having an argument about something, and she would think of an argument on his side, and she would tell it to him. he was shocked. He had never met a woman like this in his life.
Ooh.
And he broke his promise not to marry, or I wouldn't be here.
That's right. Amen. Sometimes broken promises are actually good. Now, Bob, you said something. Stratford, Connecticut. Interestingly, Stafford, Connecticut. They have a school of broadcasting there, which is where I studied broadcasting in 1984. And I wanted to go into broadcasting way back in my early 20s. I never followed through until after I became a teacher. And then I feel like now I had something more meaningful to say. And so you just brought it back full circle to my life. I studied broadcasting in Connecticut, where your mom was growing up. Now, I just want to look around this yard. Claudia, maybe we could just walk a little bit and move. It's just so beautiful and green. And look over this side here. And it's hard to believe we're in Brooklyn here.
Oh, yes.
It's amazing. Look at this. Just look around, and it's very healing. Now, you say that you're part Indian. That's very interesting, that you have that indigenous background. And do you think that played out in your development at all? Or?
It wasn't. And when I looked at my eyes, I saw the American Indian in me.
Yeah.
Fannie Mae Bumpus.
Because the Indians have been treated so poorly by Americans in the same way that blacks have been treated so poorly.
So when I did my first long bike trip from Brooklyn to San Diego on a bicycle, I went across the Wind River Valley in Wyoming. I avoided the desert Southwest on a bicycle, and I turned north in Colorado, and in the Wind River Valley I stumbled across this Indian dance ground where they were dancing for 3 days and 3 nights, constantly dancing without food or water. All right? And I got up as close to the Indian dancers as I could. And this Indian man comes up to me. He said, "The dancers can smell the water on your bike." So then I moved the bike back, way back, where I could still see the dancers. And I said, "Is this okay here?" He said, "Yes, this is okay." But then he said to me, "And even this they want to take away from us." The treatment of the Indian people here is something America should ask forgiveness for. It's just incredible. And I know that's in my body, being an American Indian, and my grandmother, she was rejected because she was into music and playing on the stage.
Wow.
I don't know what tribe she's a member of. I really should search that out.
Yes.
But I'm here among Black Americans.
And let's take a look. We're going to go to the front of the house now, Bob, so we can give a little sense to our audience. They could see the neighborhood and the block, and we'll continue this conversation. And we're so happy to have you on. This is a kind of man who's full of energy and life and joy, and I think we don't see enough of people like you in our media. We have a media filled with talking heads and that kind of thing, and we want real people who have something of substance to say, who have some life and some heart to really share with our public. So we're gonna go to the front of the house here in Brooklyn, and we're going to continue our dialogue there.
Okay.
Okay, we decided to come before we go out to the front of the house. We're going to spend a little time in Bob's basement office here. This is where all the planning takes place for his trips. And here's a map of the United States. Bob, and this was your first big bicycle trip.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you could explain a little bit.
Yes, I'm a planner. I don't just do things. I planned for this trip. I knew the route I was following. This is mainly backcountry roads and small towns. And at the main New York Public Library, they had the yellow pages from all over the country. So I would go over there with a town I knew I would be in, and I'd get the yellow pages for that town, and I'd look under churches And if I wanted to stay with a poor family, I would write to an Assembly of God or a Pentecostal church. If I wanted to stay with a middle-class family, I wrote to a Methodist church. If I wanted to stay with an upper-class family, I wrote to an Episcopal or Presbyterian church. And that's how I found places to stay at.
Never went to a hotel?
I don't.
Rarely ever.
Yeah, rarely ever. I went, and also there's an organization called Servas.
Yes.
These are S-E-R-V as in victory, A-S, Servas. These are host homes around the world that are committed to social justice and international peace, and they want to meet travelers with similar values.
So in order to qualify for that, you have to write an essay explaining your...
You have to be interviewed
Okay.
to see if you share the Servas values. And so I stayed in church homes, and I stayed with Servas homes, and there was one particular when I was crossing
Kansas?
Missouri. I stayed with a man who made like these. I have a picture of it somewhere. He made these like three-wheeled tractors that the Methodist Church bought from him and gave to poor countries all around the world so that farmers could take their fruits and vegetables into market or sick people into the hospital. And as a hobby, this man was building a gyrocopter to lift himself up into the world. And he said to me he thought the Christian church was too focused on words. And someone like him who was focused on technology was not central enough in the Christian way of thinking. And I think that's very important to keep that in mind.
My dad taught me that we're judged by our deeds and not our creeds. Yeah. And my father is an activist as well. So
Okay.
Now, Bob, you were telling a story about the mountains when you were coming through into the Northwest, and there was a particular mountain range that had you inspired and filled with awe. What was that mountain range? The Tetons, was it?
When I was in Wyoming, I climbed up this Togety Pass. It was a long, hard climb. I was just exhausted when I reached the top, but I looked off into the horizon and saw the Tetons, the natural splendor of this trip. The Tetons are just tremendous. The Rockefellers bought the Tetons so they wouldn't be commercially developed. Good. And here I was exhausted from climbing, but enthralled by the Tetons. I had never been exhausted and enthralled at the same time in my life before.
Oh my!
That was tremendous, y'all.
And what's amazing is you actually stayed in homes with people, so there was also a Christian perspective in terms of socializing and being with people. You weren't just in these anonymous hotels. You were actually making friends along the way and meeting strangers.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And I met a lot of different kinds of Americans. I remember smelling the salt air when I was coming close to the Pacific Ocean here in Oregon, and then this trip down the coast,
California.
Yeah, like Oregon and California. This is a tremendous the view off the coast.
The redwood trees and very scenic.
Yes, I was in the redwood trees. I have pictures and the other thing. But I reached the coast September 24th, and San Francisco October 25th, and San Diego November 9th.
Amazing.
So it took me about 6 months to do this trip.
At the age of 57.
57, yeah. And then I flew back home with my bicycle.
Wow. Yeah. This is amazing. Well, we're gonna now go to the front of the house, and we're going to look around at the block a little bit, and then we'll go back inside, and we'll talk a little bit. We'll talk more about some of your trips across the world as well, and try to get some of your perspective and ideas about the world, and why you're such a happy person, Bob. We want to share the secret of your happiness with the world. Is that okay?
Yeah, I want to show you something here.
Okay.
Because of my mother, I'm into books.
Oh.
Because of my father, I'm into music.
Look at the library here, Claudia. Take a look at the camera. Look at. Oh.
You're looking at, this is my mother's effect on my life.
Oh my goodness.
And this particular book is simply a marvel.
Class Lives.
Class lives. This is a look at the lower, middle, upper income classes in America. This will give you a view of America I'm sure no other book will give you. This is a tremendous, tremendous book.
Wonderful. Now, it's incredible. You know, Cornel West, who's a great public intellectual, somebody who we admire, you know what he says, Bob? He says this now. He's been saying this a lot in his lectures. He says, I am who I am because somebody loved me. Talking about his early upbringing and how that stays with us, that nurturance that we get from family.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my father and mother, they were devoted. I was an only child.
Okay.
And it took me years to realize there were other people in the world. My father and mother were devoted to me.
So you were so loved, and I think that's one reason why you have such a loving heart and loving spirit, and you could bring that to other people.
Oh yes. I'm. It's wonderful to be alive.
And the question now that we have on our show, we like to talk about how can we create a world that's more loving and caring, so that others can enjoy that quality of life. You know.
Yes. If you have a chance to express love to another person, you are doing what God hungers for us to do.
Okay. On that note, let's go to the front of the house in Brooklyn now. Okay. Good. Okay, we're still in Bob's basement now because we couldn't resist these bicycles, and this is the bicycle that Bob drove in Austria. That's one of his recent trips. And Bob, you said you have a story about that trip you want to share.
Yes, I flew. The airlines will only accept a bike if it's in a box. So I'm not a technical person. I got a bike shop to put this bike in a box, and took it to Kennedy and flew to Vienna to the airport. Well, then the problem was finding a bike mechanic there who could put the bike back together and keep the box till I got back from the trip. So all that kind of stuff is just beyond my abilities. And so I went to the Austrian consulate here in the city. I said, where is the nearest bike mechanic to the airport near Vienna? And so when I got to Vienna, I got a taxi to take me and the bike to that bike mechanic, and he put the bike back together, and he kept the box till I got back from the trip. Now, I biked up along the Danube River. There was a bike path. I didn't even have to think about automobiles. There was the Danube River and the bike path right alongside of it. And I went up to the city of Linz. Okay. That's very near a concentration camp. And I made certain that I visited.
Former concentration camp during the Second World War.
Yeah, I made certain. I have to tell a story.
Go ahead, Bob. You can't resist. I love your stories.
I have a book there. It's called The Holocaust. And in it is this story. These two teenage boys are hiding in a barn in 1945 in Germany. And they're looking out. They're on the second floor of the barn. And they're looking out through spaces between the boards out across this meadow. And beyond that, a forest. And on the left here is a German machine gun nest. And then they hear these sounds coming from the forest, so they're looking in that direction. And this tank with American decoration on the side emerges from the forest, and the German machine gun nest fires at the tank, and the boy jumps down from the second floor and runs across the meadow, and the tank lobs one shell, and that's the end of the German machine gun nest. And he runs to the tank, and the tank stops, and a black American soldier emerges from the tank and tries to get this teenage boy, out of the way. But the boy is like transfixed. He doesn't understand English to begin with. And the black soldier comes down off the tank and is standing on the ground, and the teenage boy rushes up to him and throws his arms around his legs and shouts out the only English that he can remember from his mother, who is now dead: "God bless America." Woo! That's the story.
Oh my goodness, what a story. And this is the wonderful thing about having a conversation with Bob, is he's got so many wonderful stories, and you never know what's going to trigger a particular story or not. We're gonna go outside in a second, but before that, Claudia, maybe we could just take a quick look at some of these bikes here. And Bob, which country do these bikes go? This was Austria, right?
This I take to countries where the roads are paved.
Okay, like which countries did you go with this bike?
Oh, let's see now. Well, this is New York to San Diego.
Okay.
This one.
Okay.
And then China.
Which one was China?
China, this yellow bike here.
Okay. I don't think we can see it. It's kind of dark. Yeah.
I can see.
You can see it there? Okay. The yellow bike. Okay. All right.
That's China.
Okay.
And then back here.
Okay.
This is. I did 4 trips in Germany, France, and then I took the mountain bike to Scandinavia because the roads get frozen in northern Scandinavia. The roads are rough. Thailand, the roads are rough. So I took the mountain bike to Thailand.
Okay.
4 months in Thailand in 1993-94, and then Japan.
Now this is, you're a man in your 60s and 70s, even into your 80s, and you're taking bike trips around the world.
Right. And this bike I took to Japan, where the roads are paved, and that was 1996, 98, and 2002. And Japan, fascinating, because it's developed so differently from the U.S.
Yes.
that I learned a lot about this culture from the contrasts.
Yes.
Like in Tokyo, in the subway platform, they are lined up at exactly the place the door will open when the train pulls into the station, because this is a group culture. In Times Square, it's a miscellaneous scattering of individual people up and down the platform, because this is an individual culture. And I'm sure when Japanese people come here, they go through culture shock. It is so different. Let's see. And then Germany, the roads were paved there. So I took this bike to Germany, 4 trips to Germany. And let's see. Then
But let's go outside a little bit, because it's a little dark in here. We want to let's continue the dialogue outside. Yeah. Let's continue the dialogue. Okay. Okay, we've emerged into the light now, into the front of the house, and this still has a lot of greenery around here. And Bob, there's a sign here right by your house that says Lefferts Block Association. Claudia, maybe if you could show that sign. It says the Lefferts Block Association, neighbors working together. Bob, were you involved with this, the starting of this community here, as far as the association? Talk a little bit about that, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted us to be together.
Yeah.
And in 1968, a king was shot and killed, and
Go on this side over here, yeah, by the sign. We can see.
okay, king was shot and killed, and there were riots in the urban ghettos.
Yes.
And President Johnson appointed Governor Otto Kerner of Illinois,
The Kerner Commission,
the
right?
Kerner Commission,
Yeah.
to answer the question, what did the riots mean for the future of America?
Yes.
And the Kerner Commission said it meant America was moving toward a split society of angry blacks, fearful whites, a police state to keep the peace, and a loss of freedom for everybody. When I looked at that...
But Bob, I just want to say, a lot of this is happening even today, right? But, yeah.
Oh, yes.
I'll hold the mic, Bob. I'll hold it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I thought here in my neighborhood here with Lefferts Manor, that's a single family area in the center of the neighborhood, it would be possible to build a working multiracial neighborhood. And I went to the 5 mainline churches here, and we formed the Prospect Lefferts Gardens Neighborhood Association. And that was the first thing. Then I went to my neighbors, and we formed the Lefferts Avenue Block Association, this block. There are 30 houses on this side of the block and 30 houses on the other. Right now, there are about 5 white families in 60 houses.
So still is a minority of white people in this neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. And I make a point of saying hello to my black neighbors. I think if you think about what black people have contributed to America, they were kidnapped in Africa, and then they went through the voyage across the Atlantic and came to a country where they were enslaved. From that background came jazz and the blues. You would never expect jazz and the blues to come from that background. But jazz and the blues, that's a gift of black people to the world.
Through all their suffering, that they were able to deal with the suffering because of the music.
It's just incredible that we have jazz and the blues. And in fact, I have to add one thing here. Human beings began in East Africa 6 or 7 million years ago. The original human beings looked a lot more like Obama than like you and I. And but when I look across American culture for some recognition of this tremendous event, I see nothing at all. I'm looking for someone who can create a celebratory musical drama of the rise of human beings in East Africa.
And this could be a movie or a novel or a play or a work of art of some kind.
There must be someone in New York City who can create that kind of a musical, which I think would change black people's attitude toward themselves and white people's attitude toward black people. Anyway,
the church that you and I go to, Judson Church, is also very grounded in the arts. So art can also have an impact on our thinking about historical matters, about politics. Do you remember back in the 60s, Bob, when there was a lot of upsurge of hopes and idealism and, anti-war protests and, this kind of utopian vision of a world that might be? What were you doing back in the 60s?
Well, let's see. I was commuting by bicycle about 20 miles to the Hewlett-Woodmere Public Library in Nassau County. And many of the white people who fled this neighborhood, the real estate brokers harvested this neighborhood. They went up and down these blocks and they bought houses from the scared whites for below the market. And then they turned around and sold them to the incoming middle-income blacks for above the market. We know on one house there was $10,000 difference between those two prices. There are 60 houses on a block. We're talking about there are 50,000 people in this neighborhood. We're talking about millions of dollars being made by the real estate brokers.
It reminds me of that movie, A Raisin in the Sun, with Sidney Poitier, when they try to buy a house in the suburbs and they encounter a lot of racism. Remember that movie, The Raisin in the Sun, which was a play, Lorraine Hansberry, and then it was a great movie. And,
Oh, absolutely. So in 1970, I rode my bike around this neighborhood and I counted 300 deteriorating buildings, 3 abandoned buildings. And I thought, well, this is bigger than volunteers can deal with. So I went to the United Church of Christ Housing Task Force, and Norm Eddy, a minister on that task force, said, what you need is a community organizer. I had no idea what that meant. He said, here's $5,000 to hire one. So with that vote of confidence, we got $4,500 from the Roman Catholic Fund for Human Development, $2,000 from the Chase Bank, money from neighbors, and we had about $16,000, and we hired Barbara Epstein, a fantastic community organizer.
Where is she now?
Well, she in a year she organized 60 apartment buildings.
Okay.
Well, then her husband was offered a job designing whole cities in Israel, and we lost Barbara.
Okay.
And we had organizers. Well, we had church money for about several years, and then we had state money, but a community organizer, see, we're in this individualistic culture.
Yes, it's
so
terrible,
what we're trying to do is over against the culture. And
there's a lot of atomization and alienation and fragmentation, and people are off in their own little worlds, and you're a kind of person who wants to bring people together. Is that right, Bob?
Absolutely. Wow. Absolutely. And so we need right now we don't have a community organizer. In fact, I just wrote a letter to our who recently elected a member of the state assembly, asking if she could get us money for a full-time community organizer. That's crucial in this kind of culture.
Okay, we're looking for resumes now. Okay, community organizer. Now, Bob, we're going to wrap up our show inside. I understand that Jane, your wife Jane, is cooking a lovely dinner for us. And we'll just sit back and we'll find a cozy place inside, and we'll finish our conversation and be reflective about, what is it that you want to accomplish next in terms of your activism and your work. And I think this is so lucky that our audience and Claudia and I get to hear you and hear this wise, insight that you have about living a life that's full and rich and meaningful. And again, very often we don't get this on television. We get experts of all kinds, but we don't get human beings who are really kind and decent and spiritual, and to talk about your life. 87 years young you are, and you're an inspiration to me, and you're an inspiration to many, many people now who are watching you on television. I think you're going to be famous now, but and I mean that in a good way, because we need to have a different conception of what fame is, I think, in our country. But we're gonna go inside now and continue our dialogue.
Okay.
Now we're in the kitchen where we caught up with Jane. Hello. And now we see the woman behind the man, okay? Now, and this is such a bright, cozy kitchen. It feels like I feel warmth and love and energy here. And
good food, I hope.
Good food, okay. Well, later we're going to have a nice meal.
Yes, we are.
So what do you think about this interview here with Bob?
Well, I saw the part you were doing in the backyard, and I thought that was really very good. That was Bob.
Now, my question now to you, Jane, is with all Bob's insights and wisdom and spirituality and gifts, how come NBC or ABC you'd think they'd be beating their doors down to come here? CNN, CNBC. I watch these TV shows and I feel like very alienated. I feel like I watch these shows and it's very passive. I come to Judson Church and I hear Bob and I'm filled with energy and hope. He's a very hopeful man, and we don't see this kind of hope and natural people, loving people on television today.
I watch a lot of news programs because I want to know what's going on in the world.
Okay, well, I get my news from Bob.
And it's depressing.
It is.
A lot of it is very depressing.
Okay.
And it's a relief to have somebody like Bob come in. Every time he leaves the house,
yes,
and I start to worry about him, like maybe he's writing in China and he's a little too old for this or doesn't speak enough Chinese. He always returns, and the first thing he says is, I've had the most amazing experience. And he could just be on an errand to the grocery store or something and come home and say, I've had the most amazing experience.
Now,
my life is very dull.
I think all of our lives are.
Time. And I come home and my experience is maybe shouldn't be repeated.
But we want to know the secret from Bob. We want Bob to share with us the secret of his life. We have so many Americans now, Bob, are very depressed. America has 5% of the world's population, but we consume 66% of the psychological medications. We got people popping Prozac, making pharmaceutical companies rich. How do you stay so optimistic and hopeful, Bob? What if you could sum it up in a few sentences?
I believe in a God of love best revealed in Jesus.
Oh, my goodness. Oh.
Yeah. And I'm a graduate of Yale University Divinity School.
Now we're getting somewhere. Okay.
Okay. And there I studied with Richard Niebuhr, Reinhold Niebuhr's brother. And Richard Niebuhr, in front of the classroom, was struggling with the faith. It was fantastic to be in the same room with him. Years ago, I struggled with the question, could you be an intelligent person and be a Christian? And I had my doubts. But then I was down in North Carolina, and I went to an Institute of Religion in Raleigh, and this man got up in the pulpit, and before he had 2 sentences out of his mouth, my question was answered. That was Reinhold Niebuhr. Reinhold Niebuhr, a giant thinker in the Christian church. I memorized a sentence from one of Reinhold Niebuhr's books. Man's modesty before the cosmic immensity is considerably modified by his pride in discovering that immensity. And Reinhold Niebuhr has been central in my thinking. I want to point out this sign on the wall here from
Kierkegaard, Soren Kierkegaard.
From Denmark. Where am I? Who am I? How did I come to be here? What is this thing called the world? How did I come into the world? Why was I not consulted? And if I am compelled to take part in this, where is the director? I want to see him.
Wow. Oh, my. Kierkegaard was one of the founders of existentialist philosophy. He was a theological thinker. He was a Christian. But there was one thing about Kierkegaard that's interesting, was he was supposed to get married, and he chose not to get married. And I was reading Martin Buber, who is also a great theologian, who wrote I and Thou. He's one of my heroes, Martin Buber, in The Sacred Art of Dialogue. We find God in the details of community and community life. And what Buber had to say about Kierkegaard was that he was very critical of the fact that Kierkegaard chose not to marry his beloved. I forget her name, but he was supposed to get married. He broke off that engagement because he felt that he wanted to devote his life to God. But according to Buber, we find God in love and in community and with people. And he said that Kierkegaard should have married his beloved instead of turning away.
Yes, I want to say that on June 12th, Jane and I will celebrate our 55th year of being married together, and we're still talking to each other.
Now, that's a miracle in itself. How does that happen, Jane? How does that?
I don't know. It went very quickly. I know that.
Okay.
And but also he takes trips, so I get a break.
A little time apart is
being a normal person.
Okay.
As opposed to living with this person who is so exciting and always finds everything so exciting and earth-shattering and everything. And it's nice to just have a regular, normal, quiet time to myself. I like that a lot.
It's a good balance. It's a good balance. And Bob, you sang a love song outside when we were beginning. Maybe why don't we go to the living room to finish off in the living room? Yeah, let's go to a different room. Okay, yeah. Okay, now we're sitting in the cozy living room of Bob Thomason here in Brooklyn, New York, and we've been talking with his wife Jane, and we've been in front of the house, and we've been in the basement, and we've been in the backyard, and we're sort of winding up this wonderful hour of just being together and being human and telling stories. And Bob, you want to close with a story about China. That was one of your recent trips.
Right. Before I went to China, I studied Mandarin conversation for 18 months with a native speaker. You cannot learn Mandarin from a book because it's a tonal language. You have to get the tones right to get the meanings right. So I could speak with the people in China very, very simply. And I flew with my bicycle to Hong Kong, and I stayed with a couple. The husband was English, his wife was Chinese, and they took bicycle tour groups into China. And they lived on the island of Lantou. In front of the house next door to them was a water buffalo in Hong Kong. And they said to me, "Did you know the Chinese customs were taking bikes away from individual cyclists at the Hong Kong border?" I said, "No, I didn't know that. What do you think I should do?" They said, "Try going in through Macau." So I took the ferry down to Macau, and I biked to the Chinese border station, and I got into China in Macau and biked to Guangzhou. Is that?
No, I want to just, and sort of closing, Bob, I want to just reflect on this and what it is about you that I think makes you so special is your spirit of adventure, your spirit of playfulness, of connection, of reaching out to others. There's a strong spiritual quality that you embody, but there's also social justice. And we thank you for blessing us. And if you could just give us a few parting words of advice about how to live a fuller, richer life.
I think be in touch with the God of love and explore God's wonderful gift to us, the cosmos that God has given us as a wonderful gift of love.
Wow. So in Brooklyn, New York, this is Bob Thomason, a bicyclist, a retired librarian, and a person filled with the joy of living in the spirit of God and love, and a true humanitarian. Thank you, Bob, for all the joy you bring us. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a privilege to be here.
I love this sign that you have here, Bob. It says, "How to Build Community." And there's a whole list of suggestions for how to build a community, starting with turn off your TV. Of course, when our show is finished, then you could turn it off. But then it says, leave your house, know your neighbors, look up when you are walking, greet people, sit on your stoop, plant flowers. There you go. Just a few suggestions, Bob. And do you practice these principles?
Absolutely.
You don't have an iPod. You don't wear like these people now. They walk around with iPods.
I'm not a technical person. No.
Maybe technology can also be hampering to community in certain aspects.
I don't know. I grew up in a different kind of world. My wife is into computers, and if I have a computer kind of question, she helps me with that. But I'm for a simpler life.
And you say hello to your neighbors.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, we're going to say goodbye now, and with Bob Thomason in Brooklyn, and see you next time on the Public Voice Salon.
Right.